England, a weak nation lacking a strong military or navy, no overseas empire, and a chaotic war with France. All until 1559, the crowning of a new queen, Elizabeth I. Elizabeth overcame extraordinary obstacles to gain the crown, but her struggle was not over. There was one thing about her that would lead to scandal, that would threaten her power, and that would jeopardize her security. She was a woman. However, Elizabeth was intelligent enough to realize one way she could maintain and preserve her power: by manipulating her suitors. She had learned this the hard way, through a chaotic childhood scandal. This began with the death of her father, the powerful King Henry Tudor. He had left Elizabeth with a will that made her rich. Her place in the line of succession made her a tempting target. One man in particular, Thomas Seymour. Thomas Seymour, uncle to the young King Edward V, was an ambitious and determined man. After making many efforts to gain power in court, he attempted to get closer to Elizabeth by marrying Henry VIII's widow, Catherine Parr, who was also Elizabeth's guardian. This meant that Seymour was not only her stepfather but also her guardian. This was a great position of trust, which he abused shockingly. He was 40 and she was only 14. Though it started out with little innocent games, Seymour's games grew darker and darker. He started to make advances towards Elizabeth, sneaking into her chamber before she was dressed, and sometimes before she was even awake. Even if she was awake, he would bid her good morning and strike her upon the back or on the butt. Thomas, while doing this, was often only partly dressed. One time in the garden, he cut her gown into 100 pieces. Historian David Starkley said, he may have even sexually abused her. At the very least, he abused his power. Elizabeth was very confused about these affairs. Sometimes she acted as if they were small games, and at other times she got offended. During one of their meetings, Catherine Parr saw Elizabeth in Seymour's arms and had her sent away to the house of Anthony Denny in order to preserve her reputation. Catherine died shortly after the birth of her child, and Seymour resumed to his dirty intentions. This time he had the powerful backing of Cat Ashley, Elizabeth's governess. Ashley was clever enough to realize that this marriage could never take place without the backing of the council, but Seymour was too impulsive and impatient to wait. In an attempt to kidnap the young King Edward VI, Seymour was caught and charged with treason. Elizabeth, thought of as being in a secret relationship with Seymour, was suspected of planning this conspiracy as well. Then a rumor began that she was pregnant with Seymour's child. She complained bitterly to Somerset, brother of Thomas Seymour, who eventually ordered the execution of his brother in March 1549. This incident marked a turning point in her young life. She learned that any relationship, even a close friendship, might mean danger. She knew now that when a man approached her, he had his eyes on the throne, and not her.
With this began her long successful reign as the Virgin Queen of England, during which she used many of her suitors to strengthen her political rule. Pressured by the Privy Council and Parliament, Elizabeth was forced into an alliance with Prince Frederick of Denmark. Young Prince Frederick tried to woo Elizabeth with his charms. As a person, Frederick was described as hot-headed, courageous, and ambitious. He was also a lover of hunting, wine, and feast. Despite her lack of interest with this alliance, Elizabeth kept Frederick believing that they would soon get married. This was an attempt to preserve a strong alliance between Protestant supporters in both countries. About 8 years later, when Elizabeth I was crowned queen, she received a marriage proposal from Philip II of Spain, the ex-husband of her dead half-sister, Mary Tudor. Mary had died about a year ago, and Philip was eager for a strong alliance with England. Though she was disgusted by the idea of marrying her half-sister's ex-husband, who was a devout Catholic, she pretended to be interested in the alliance and used a series of delaying tactics to keep him waiting.
During this time period, young Prince Eric of Sweden also pursued Elizabeth against the will of his father. However, unlike Philip II of Spain, he did not want this alliance for political gains. He was impressed by her beauty and leadership qualities. Elizabeth greatly manipulated Eric to preserve a friendly relationship between the two countries. In 1560, Eric had to give up his dream of marrying Elizabeth and return home to Sweden because of his father's death. Even after moving back to Sweden, Eric was prone to sending the Queen letters containing passionate declarations of love, which greatly entertained her. Eventually, Elizabeth replied to these letters by politely denying his proposals. She said, "Most serene prince, our very dear cousin, a letter truly yours, both in the writing and sentiment, was given us on 30th December by your very dear brother, the Duke of Finland. And while we perceive there from the zeal and love of your mind towards us not diminished, yet in part we are grieved that we cannot gratify your serene highness with the same kind of affection. I beg your serene highness again and again that you be pleased to set a limit to your love, that it advance not beyond the laws of friendship, for the present nor disregard them in the future. And we in turn shall take care of whatever can be required for the holy preservation of friendship."
While Spain seeked an alliance with England, France did not fall back on the game. Catherine de' Medici, the influential mother of King Charles IX, Henry de Valois, and Francois de Valois, made many efforts to join her sons in a marriage alliance with Queen Elizabeth. These attempts were made in order to secure a strong relationship between England and France. First, Catherine sent Elizabeth a proposal to marry her oldest son, King Charles IX, who was 14 years old and less than half the age of Elizabeth. As soon as Elizabeth rejected this proposal, Catherine sent yet another proposal for her second son, Henry de Valois, Duke of Anjou. There was a 20-year age gap between the two, and he was notorious for his promiscuity with both sexes. He was also a devout Catholic, causing Elizabeth to instantly reject the marriage proposal because of her strong memory of Mary Tudor's disastrous marriage with Philip II of Spain. About 12 years later, Catherine made her last effort to form an alliance with England by sending Elizabeth a marriage proposal for her third son, Francois de Valois, Duke of Alençon. Francois was ugly and small, but Elizabeth, already in her mid-40s, instantly liked him when he arrived at her court during the summer of 1579. She gave him the nickname of "My Little Frog." Even though Elizabeth was attracted to Francois, the majority of the Privy Council opposed this alliance, and because of this, Elizabeth gave in to public opinion. In autumn of 1581, there was a change in political climate with worsening relations between Spain and England. This caused a greater desire for an Anglo-French alliance, and Francois de Valois came back to London. The Spanish ambassador, Bernardino de Mendoza, reported to Philip of Spain. On the 22nd, however, at 11 in the morning, the Queen and Alençon were walking together in a gallery, Leicester and Walsingham being present, when the French ambassador entered and said that he wished to write to his master, from whom he had received orders to hear from the Queen's own lips her intentions with regard to marrying his brother. She replied, "You may write this to the king that the Duke of Alençon shall be my husband," and at the same time she turned to Alençon and kissed him on the mouth. This encounter left the council appalled. Elizabeth was convinced and decided to give the French additional terms for marriage, which she knew were unacceptable. She gave the French a large sum of money to fight the Spanish in the Netherlands and bade farewell to Francois.
As soon as the marriage negotiations with Philip II of Spain were halted, Emperor Ferdinand I of the Holy Roman Empire arrived at the English court in 1568 with the marriage proposal of his son, Archduke Charles of Austria. Though Elizabeth was not interested in the alliance, she kept the negotiations going for several years in an attempt to please her council, which was getting anxious for a strong male ruler. The alliance ended when Charles refused to compromise the practice of his faith in Catholicism. Throughout her reign, Elizabeth formed several other alliances with suitors from Austria, Portugal, Sweden, and Denmark in an attempt to strengthen her political diplomacy and foreign alliances. She managed to successfully play her suitors for more than 25 years.
However, there was one man who was more than a pawn in her games, possibly even a lover, Robert Dudley. Elizabeth loved men of wit, charm, and attentiveness, especially those who crowded around her to provide a welcome distraction from the often tedious affairs of state, and Dudley perfectly fit these qualities. He was tall, dark, and handsome. In addition to being a fine athlete and superb dancer, he loved the theater and sponsored a private company of actors. Being impressed by his talent and charisma, Elizabeth gave him the position of Master of Horse, which allowed them to spend a lot of time together. She showered him with gifts, including extensive country estates and large sums of money, and honors such as Knight of the Garter and Constable of Windsor Castle. Though he was married to Amy Robsart, Dudley openly flaunted his intimate and passionate relationship with the Queen. When rumors spread that Dudley killed his wife to have a chance at becoming the king, the Queen gave up on him, especially because it would have stained her character. Though their relationship was over, Dudley would remain with her and continue to influence her actions for as long as she lived. In his last letter to Elizabeth, Dudley wrote, "I most humbly beseech your majesty to pardon your poor old servant to be thus bold in sending to know how my gracious lady doth."
How did Elizabeth I's relationship with her suitors affect her political reign? The queen did fish for men's souls and had so sweet a bait that no one could escape her network. Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, utilized her position as ruler of England and the idea of marriage to influence her political rule. After a scandalous childhood incident with Tom and Seymour, she learned how to use marriage as a weapon to increase her political status. She used the idea of marriage to gain many suitors, including Prince Frederick of Denmark, King Philip II of Spain, the sons of Catherine de' Medici, the Archduke Charles of Austria, and Robert Dudley. At the same time, these suitors seeked a relationship with the Queen in order to gain political alliances with the powerful England.
When Elizabeth I came to the throne, England was an insignificant country. By the end of her reign, it was a major European power. The preface to the King James Bible hailed her as the bright Occidental star. Queen Elizabeth, a famous memory, and the star still burns